That's
Good.
it. Okay, it's Jerry, and we're back with Newsmakers Zoom chat, and today we're talking with Assembly Member Monique Limon. Thank you so much for being with us and taking the time. I know you're hugely busy.
Thank you, Jerry. Glad to do this.
First of all, everybody safe in your extended clan? Uncle Raul's okay?
Yeah, so as you know, Jerry, I have a big extended clan. So I have, my cousin Jasmine that's a nurse in the, ER. I have multiple teachers, Marlene, Lisa, Theo, Gary, who are teachers, who are super focused on trying to connect with their students. I have small business owners like my Uncle Raul and my Uncle Pepe, and Yolanda, and so many folks who are impacted. So luckily, the family's healthy, but everybody is feeling the impact. This is so real to everybody, no matter what their job is.
Yeah. So what are you doing? Are you going out and about? Are you at home mostly? Are you in your office? Sacramento is pretty much shut down in terms of the legislature.
So I am mostly working from home and in the Santa Barbara office. There's 3 offices, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Sacramento. But we are in regular communication. The team has multiple, staff calls every week. Yesterday was a Sunday morning, and Senator Jackson and I were on the phone on a Sunday morning with the governor's team related to Samson, which is a very important issue to all of us in this community, and what we're going to do to help Samson move forward and stay in place. So there really hasn't been boundaries of the times of day that we're working or the locations. I am expected to go back next week to Sacramento. I serve on the Budget Sub 2 committee, which oversees all funding for early childhood, K-12, and higher ed. And we do have budget hearings because, as you might imagine, the budget issues in those areas are really significant. Yeah. So that's the plan. I am expected to be back in Sacramento next week to attend these budget hearings.
I want to talk about the budget, but we have obviously 2 crises: with the public health crisis and the economic crisis. Let me ask you about the public health first, because this is what people really don't know. The number 1 item on the governor's list for reopening is tests, and he talked today. He said he'd have more information on Wednesday. Maybe we'll get to 25,000 a day. But I don't understand. We hear all this about how we're the 5th largest economy and we're a nation state. Why can't California use its purchasing power to get 10 million testing units? Why are we behind other states and even countries with smaller economies than ours on this?
Yeah, so I actually do think we are using, as a state, our purchasing power to try to do some of that. I think the challenge is the scarcity. It's the supply. The combination and the formula of supply and demand right now is challenging. And it's more challenging than other times, where even if we had the funds to purchase it, the demand on these particular supplies is so great that it's been very, very difficult to get the supplies we need. And I think that says a lot, even for a state like California that can try to find the resources, that's established some very strong private-public partnerships to try to achieve this. We are still having challenges in getting more tests here.
All right. Do you have any inside information on when we here locally are going to get enough diagnostic tests so that we could maybe begin to move ahead on opening the economy?
I don't know a timeline for that. And I think a lot of us are looking for what that timeline would be, but it's a formula that has multiple variables, and all of those variables are changing. 1, it's the supply itself, but 2, it's the readiness of the county. What I envision is that every county is going to be making this decision for themselves. It's going to be a phased-in approach, and also based on the number of individuals and population in that county. Now, it doesn't mean that the more people you have, the faster you're going to go. I actually think that if you look at LA County and the numbers we're getting out of LA County in the last couple of days, I think they're hit among the hardest, and they will take longer to recover. But we don't have a timeline. It's a conversation we have on a regular basis with the legislature. We've, been on the phone with Dr. Charity Dean, who is responsible, as we all know her because she came from Santa Barbara County,
Right.
but she's responsible for the testing. And, it's a matter of weeks and months. That's probably the best that we can say at this moment.
Can you clear up something that I'm confused about? Over the weekend, Ventura County took some steps to begin to reopen smaller businesses that don't personally serve people. Groups of 5 or more is okay. And then we heard at the governor's press conference today that San Luis Obispo County has also put in a letter to do something similar, it sounds like. How are counties able to be doing this? Santa Barbara's not doing that. How does that work? What's that process?
Yeah, so as a representative who represents both Santa Barbara and Ventura County, I've been on calls with county officials and regular calls. I mean, we're updating, twice a week on these issues with each county, and each county is each county is unique. It's unique in the number of hospitals, the number of clinics, the number of resources, the population size. So when you saw that Ventura over the weekend opened up some of their parks, for example, it really wasn't all the parks. It was just a number of parks where they felt that social distancing at 6 feet could occur. And I think you're going to see more of that. I believe that all counties are in a place where they would love to start to reopen and phase in an approach transition. However, the resources are limited in every single county, and they're slightly different. You see, for example, that in a county like Ventura County that receives, was able to receive some of the Stimulus CARES Act funding directly, that didn't go to Santa Barbara County because they didn't meet the population threshold. I mean, you see real differences between county to county, which is why I think the state's approach is going to be to look at the counties to make some recommendations to the state and to make some recommendations for their own population in terms of how to phase in an approach to open. And the counties, it's not just one person. This is not just the public health department. So for example, Santa Barbara County, for every emergency and natural disaster we have a call a couple times a week where you have the head of public health, the CEO, you have elected officials from every single city, you have public safety, you have mental health folks, you have business and economic development folks on the call. I mean, you have an array of individuals that are contributing to this decision making. This is not just one person. And it really is that collaborative overall consensus that helps us determine what the next step is for the county.
So there are folks in Santa Barbara County who are real eager to get moving on this. How would you characterize what the differences in Ventura and in Santa Barbara that accounts for them making the step and Santa Barbara not?
Well, I think that overall, remember that initially Ventura County was first to put some of these recommendations and guidelines in place, and their numbers increased at the very beginning. The first 2 weeks, their numbers were higher than Santa Barbara County. They're now leveled off and almost the same. So if you look at the growth and pace of their ability to manage, not just the surge for the hospitals, but also their testing and everything else, it's slightly different. And I think that we've recognized that. They started a little bit earlier. I think Santa Barbara County is trying to get there. I absolutely believe, but I think they're taking precautions, as every county should. And let's be clear, Ventura County did not open up everything. There are still restrictions in place. We still know that students aren't going back to work. There's still serious conversations over what's an essential, non-essential business. So they're not that much further ahead of us, but they did start before us.
And it sounds like the differential must be the testing and how broad the testing has been, that they're further along in that area than Santa Barbara County.
So they are in some capacities a little further along, but we also have to remember that here in Santa Barbara County, we've had some new issues pop up in the last couple weeks that aren't exactly issues that happened in Ventura or San Luis Obispo County. So you have, for example, the law prison, right? That's a new issue. It's specific to Santa Barbara County, and it turns out that it is, an issue that has national attention on it because there is no other prison with that many number of individuals who have tested positive. So there are some uniqueness. And when all is said and done, the reason that if people think, well, what's happening at the prison can impact me, if we have a surge there, it's going to go to Lompoc, right, to the Lompoc Hospital. And after the Lompoc Hospital, it will have to feed into other areas, including San Luis Obispo or other hospitals in Santa Barbara. So there really are considerations that are beyond, just, hey, one county did this, one county did the other. You have to look at what's happening in your county at this particular moment.
All right. Let me ask you, there's a lot of, well, not a lot, there are some demonstrations. I know there's a big one in the Capitol today, which doesn't look like people are practicing social distancing from the photographs, that people are saying, stop the lockdown. We want to, give us our liberty to get coronavirus or whatever it is. Is that happening locally? Have you seen any evidence of that? And what do you say to folks who are feeling that way?
Yeah, so I think there is a big demonstration today in the Capitol, but that is starting to happen locally. We've gotten phone calls, we've gotten emails, people who have reached out to our office, to me directly, with a lot of anxiety, right, about when we're going to be able to open up. And, I reassure people, we want to transition. As I talk to leaders, right, whether they're medical, science, economic leaders in our community or elected leaders, there is an interest in opening up and transitioning. But it's, something that we have to be patient. We talk a lot about, we'd rather see people 6 feet apart than we would 6 feet underground. Like, this is very real to us. And we are concerned. No one is making these decisions lightly. Whether it was the decisions to stay at home, the stay-at-home orders, the decisions on how and when we'll transition, they're not being made lightly. And all of these opinions are being considered. I obviously am concerned about the demonstrations and the lack of distancing, the lack of protective gear. I don't want anyone, whether they agree with our position or not, to get sick.
Yeah. What's the number one priority that you are working on right now? Getting us more tests?
Yes. So there is the immediate need of getting more tests, right? But that's for each county. There's also resources. Our office has received a number of, we've been in contact and in communication with both counties and with the cities we represent. And I have to tell you that as we start to project what budgets are going to look like, this is going to be an incredibly difficult year. I think 2021 has the potential to be harder than 2020, but we are seeing budget deficits for all the counties and cities in a very deep way. So I have multiple number ones. I don't have the luxury of just picking one thing, but we're looking at meeting the immediate medical needs, which is the testing. We're looking at trying to address some of the budget concerns and shortfalls for our district. The number one call that I'm getting in my office is about EDD right now. So for me, that also, the unemployment.
Because the system's overwhelmed by so many people trying to get in?
Absolutely, 2.7 million. We used to have a 6,000 month average in the 3 years that I've been in the legislature. It is now 2.7 million claims. This is significant. It's telling. It's a 500% increase than what the system's used to see. And so we have so many number one issues that are happening, and we're trying to address them all in different ways and work collaboratively.
So what are you doing to try to unblock the roadblock at the ADD to help people get their unemployment insurance faster?
So we have been on the phone, for example, with California's Labor Secretary, Julie Su, about this. And so they've increased their hours. So they are now working between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. every single day, 7 days a week. There's multiple shifts. Some of the staff that used to work for different agencies were reassigned to EDD for the state of California. So we've moved more folks. We haven't necessarily hired more people, but we moved them from different departments over to EDD. They've opened up their portal to be able to answer more questions. And actually, our office has even helped people to use the web portal, the phone portal and a fax portal to make sure their claim gets in. Not a lot of people have faxes, but it turns out our office does. So we've tried all ways to help.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So what's your, bottom line advice to somebody who's desperately trying to get their unemployment and they're having trouble?
If they're having trouble, I highly suggest that they reach out to our office, that they reach out. They can email us at assemblymember.limon@asm.ca.gov. Reach out to us, call our offices. We are all still working. We're still taking phone calls. We're still taking emails. We're active on social media. I think if anyone is having specific issues with a department or an agency in California, that's one thing that people sometimes forget that state representatives do. We help you navigate those issues with state agencies. We sometimes aren't able to get the right answer. We can't tell the agencies what to do, but we can certainly try to help you navigate that. And that's one really important role of our constituent offices for state representatives.
All right, that's really good information. Okay, let's talk about the state budget. Because there's going to be this massive deficit. I mean, obviously we had, thanks to former Governor Brown, in large part a reserve, but that's gone. That was 17.9 billion or something like that. And my understanding is the legislative analyst is now talking about 26 billion current fiscal year shortfall. Is that right?
That's right. They're rough numbers. They said it could go up to hundreds of billions. It depends on what resources we're able to get from the federal government and the severity of this situation. How long we are on, stay-at-home orders and the ongoing and long-term impact. So there's, again, multiple variables where it depends, but this is a deep budget. Our $21 billion rainy day fund is not going to cut it. And I know that as a member of California's budget committee in the assembly, we are really talking about the June 15th budget being a skeleton budget that keeps the lights on and not more than that. This is going to be a very, very difficult year. So it's so difficult because as I work with counties and cities, and they're recognizing and listing out their budgets, I remind people that the state of California also is short on sales tax, on earned income, you name it, capital gains. All of our numbers are also down, and we also have to think about the lack of cash flow that we will have in a state.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because obviously our tax system is, heavily weighted toward wealthy people and capital gains, giving an over proportion of money, and that's going to be the shortfall. So those revenues are just being whacked, and at the same time, the demand for health and welfare programs, Medi-Cal and CalWORKs, is going to grow. We have the school funding. We have Prop 98 that's going to kind of lock that in. Let's take it one piece at a time. What about the schools? What can the schools and your colleagues on your former seat on the Unified School District, what can they expect?
So it's going to be a rough year. No one should expect any budget increases. They should expect, if anything, minimal budgets. But the one thing that I will tell you that, as I've spoken with school districts, I was on the phone with the president of Allen Hancock last week and Jack O'Connell actually talking about this very issue, that in the absence of the state being able to backfill the lost money, they are asking for flexibility in how they use some of their existing money. Some of the monies are very much assigned to certain uses, and law requires for some things, but for other things, we are going to be exploring how they can move pots of money from one bucket to another bucket. And that's one of their biggest asks. They know we can't do more. Although, let me be clear, we're trying to do more. We are still, the state of California has lobbyists, at the federal level, we're all in touch with our federal representatives and we're asking for more. However, we don't have the ability to just print more money in a state, right? So in the absence of that, we are looking for other reforms that we can do to help local municipalities.
Right, and as they're negotiating the latest federal bailout recovery, whatever you want to call it, I know the Democrats are pushing very hard for money for state and local governments, and the Republicans are pushing back against that very, very hard as well. We're going to have Salud Carbajal later this week, and maybe we can get an update on that. But that's a huge problem, because it's not just the state, it's not just the county, it's not just the city, it's every school district throughout the state, and business is not operating, so those taxes are just not coming in. This is going to be worse than it was during the Great Recession, do you not think?
I do. At least that's the projection right now from economists and budget experts, that this is going to be among the toughest budgets times and recessions that we've seen, certainly in my time in the legislature. But I also am very committed to continue. I mean, these conversations with local municipalities are continuously happen, and it doesn't mean that we just accept that it's tough. We're actively trying to work to figure out what we can do to help our local municipalities. So whether it's flexible spending, whether it's looking at alternative, whether it's looking at, reshifting some of the regulations or priorities, loosening something for a year or two. I mean, there's definitely pieces that we are all exploring in this conversation to try to help municipalities right now.
But we're going to have teacher layoffs, are we not?
I think I don't know about teacher layoffs immediately, but I would expect that, just as we've seen the city of Santa Barbara, city of LA have to do furloughs, local small businesses, right, in the private sectors, I do expect that that's likely to happen. I can tell you that in the state capital, there's already some of those restrictions coming on board. So I imagine that will be the same for every entity. You won't see a whole lot of hiring. There'll be some reconsiderations, probably not fill positions of people who are retiring. So unfortunately, it's something that we know because it's happened before, but I expect that will likely be the case. But we're going to keep working. The need for teaching our students is not going away. It is still there. We're going to keep working to do everything we can. And if not anything, it's going to be harder. I mean, our students have been on distance learning for weeks, and they are coming back and to need, some, resources to get back into the groove, to assess them, right, in terms of where they're at. So this is not going to be in any way.
Yeah, let's stay with that a second, because you mentioned you're on budget subcommittee number 2, which is education funding, and obviously you're former school board member. There is no way that the online learning is going to substitute for the kids being in school. 2 questions. 1, how confident are you that school is going to start up again in the fall? And 2, what do you see, from an education perspective being the fall off? Normally they say, kids lose a month of learning over the summer. How much are they losing now? Is this going to be a totally lost year?
It's hard for me to say. It's going to be well over a month. And I think that we are doing everything we can. Just yesterday, I was on FaceTime with my 12-year-old niece who goes to Santa Barbara High, and she asked me, do you think we'll be back in August for school? And she wants to be back. She, like so many students, was excited for the first 2 weeks and is ready to go back now and is ready to do everything. And I thought, about the fact that not just kids, but really school administrators and teachers are eager to go back. I saw that Franklin Elementary School posted this morning on their social media some of the curriculum that a teacher is using for for distance learning. So we are doing everything we can. We've been in conversations with Superintendent Tony Thurman, about this, and I know that the state wants our kids to go back this fall. We believe it's important. We do recognize that there's been lost learning. We also know that we are going to see even harder challenges. There are some school districts that have 30% of kids who are not logging in, some who have 70% of kids who are not logging in, and even getting the distance learning. So when you think about that child and the learning that's going on there, and this isn't a blame game, this is hard. We just, I've talked to parents who said, wait, I don't have the capacity to have 5 computers.
I don't have wireless, or I don't have a
Right,
pad.
it's going down, right? I mean, there's so many different things that are going on. This isn't a blame game. This is about understanding and recognizing that the need is going to be greater. So that is our hope. That's what we're working towards. And some of the schools around the world that have gone back, they don't look the same, right? There's scattered days where you go. There's distancing that it has to happen. It looks different. And all of those things are things that the state of California is considering.
All right. I looked at that list of nursing homes. I guess about 10% of the cases in the state are in congregate nursing home living situations. And there are 2 in Santa Barbara County, both in Lompoc. Have you been working on that issue, and where does that stand?
So it's an issue that we have been following. It's an issue that the county is aware of. We have concerns, the whole state, about the whole state and nursing homes and how fast it's moving, in the same way that it would in other confined areas where you have a great number of people. This continues to be a pattern, right, where you have a lot of people concentrated, where it spreads faster, and that's a huge concern to us. And there are conversations at the state level about what could be done. Could we do emergency regulations, but what would that look like? And I have to tell you that I don't know that there's consensus yet about what the best thing to do is. And so much of this is local. I think of some of my colleagues that represent very rural areas of California, and their go-to isn't always, well, make sure to remove them from that situation and send them over to the hospital or to a clinic, because they're like, wait, we don't have one that's nearby. That's a 2-hour commute. And so there's really and complicated conversations happening, but it is a concern, no doubt. It is a concern for the state of California and for the counties. And we may see some regulations or guidelines that come out to better address that. They may be slightly different based on counties, but that is something that's on our radar.
All right, 2 quick questions, and I'm going to let you go because I know you're really busy. But, it seems like a long time ago when the governor gave his State of the State speech, and homelessness was the #1 issue, and there were going to be a lot of big ticket programs addressing that issue. Now it's just a matter of trying to keep people safe. Give me your just your breakdown on where we stand on homelessness and pandemic, and is there a way to transition from where we are now to permanent housing once this passes?
So the goal for the state has continued, pre-COVID-19 and during and post-COVID-19, is to try to address some of the issues for our homelessness population. And so what you're seeing is, for example, the approach now, if you look at what counties are doing, they've taken among our most vulnerable homeless individuals, and they've put them not in permanent, but in temporary housing, which looks like a lot of hotels or motel opportunities for our most vulnerable, right? So the county has data on individuals, and we know who tends to be more prone to getting sick, who has health conditions that make them more vulnerable. And that's the homeless population we're focusing on right now. That's pretty much the approach for the entire state, and we will continue. COVID-19 is a pressing issue, along with the fact that we still have issues related to homelessness, to housing, wildfires. I mean, that's something we're still talking about, because those are not going to discriminate on whether we have COVID-19 or not. There's still issues related to that we're still working on at the state.
I guess my question, and just real quick, but is, with the state spending the money now to put people in temporary housing, is there a way to purchase that housing and make that more permanent?
So you may have seen that there was some purchasing done for some of the facilities. So for example, very early on, our governor talked about purchasing a hospital that was not being used in the Bay Area. The focus is a tiered approach, where you look at the biggest populations of homelessness, the bigger cities, and that's where some of the purchases have been made. Here in Ventura and Santa Barbara County, the purchases have not been made, but it is the goal of the state to start to look at these opportunities. It is also the goal of the state not to leave housing considerations aside from all of this. Now more than ever, we know that individuals who continue to struggle to pay rent, who are home, we don't want them to go into our homeless population. So that's something that's still very much a consideration for us. And we were over 1 million units short in the state in terms of housing before this, and we continue to be now. So those conversations are absolutely not going away. Will we have the resources to do a big push all at once? Likely not. It's going to be right as we can and as resources allow.
All right. Last question. It's easy to forget that you're actually running for office now. You're running for the state Senate seat now held by Hennebeth Jackson. Pretty easy campaign, actually. How much attention do you have to give to that?
So at this time, I have to tell you that I've not focused on the non-state side, on the campaign side. What you learn about this job is that you have to, as an elected leader, be flexible to prioritize what the community needs you to prioritize. We had a primary election on March 5th, and I mean, immediately after, everything started to bubble up very quickly. And so we really haven't focused as much on the non-state side. It's been full focus on this, and it's going to be this. I think people are having conversations broadly. You've seen at the national level, at the state level. My colleague, Assemblymember Mark Berman, introduced a bill to make the November election a full and all vote by mail election. Right. In the case that that's needed. I was on a different call last week with Alex Padilla, our Secretary of State. And that came up in terms of what are we going to do in November. We still want to allow people to have a voice and vote no matter what happens. So those things are on the radar, but they're just not the priority right now. I will tell you that the census is more of a priority at this point than some of that.
All right. Monique Limon, thank you so much for being with us. I know you
thanks for what you're doing, Jerry. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thanks for making sure that our community is up to date and has this information. I really thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming by. Bye.